Alright guys, welcome to part 3 of diagramming. In this section we're going to look at 3 different types of diagrams. The first one of which is something like this, the sort of plan cut, pulled apart diagram, but it's sort of emphasizing the slicing of the plan, the three-dimensionality of the plan. And the other two, one of which is this, basically the section perspective or the perspective section cut, like that. And the variation of that is this, the perspective section cut that has the sort of ghosted foreground line work, right? And that's just a sort of addition to that, okay? So to begin with, we're gonna pick up where we left off in the second video, and I'm going to leave that in place, but basically just sort of select all of this and copy it somewhere else. Okay, so it's sort of out of the way. So working with this, I'm going to show you a couple different methods, but I'll show you how this thing works first. And I'm going to use here is the plane tool, the rectangular plane tool. The sort of Rhino command for it is just plane, P-L-A-N-E. And once you activate it, you basically draw a plane like this. You click, draw a plane. And what you want to do is like move it somewhere up so it intersects with what you're cutting, right? And this sort of looks weird right now because I'm in a parallel view, right? So remember that you can always just switch it back to perspective. It's sort of looking really strange. I never model in parallel view. It's only for exporting or outputting only. But if you look at this, then this is you can use this as the sort of the equivalent of the 2D trim tool. But if you select the plane first and then say TR trim, right, it'll ask you what object to trim, and you can say that, and basically it cuts it off, enter, right? And if you move this out of the way or delete it, basically, the object's chopped off. Now, the thing here though with this command in particular is that it doesn't self-heal, right? It doesn't self-heal the section cut, so it'll be able to see into your geometry like this, which is not great. So there are a couple ways to deal with this. The first way is to actually, and usually you can do this, granted if your sort of geometry is clean enough, you can just run a command called cap. And it will ask you for surfaces or polysurface to cap, and just select them and enter, and it will fill it up automatically. But sometimes you will run into maybe some of like the more complex, maybe not these, but sometimes you'll run into more complex walls that just can't be filled normally. So in those cases, you will have to actually do it manually, or you can leave it alone if you just want to do your post-processing or sort of image editing eventually in Photoshop. You can fill in the poche in Photoshop, doesn't matter, right? It's up to you whether or not you want to fix the model. Depends on whether you're looking for rendering output or just the line work. If it's just the line work, then usually it's not the biggest deal, right? So you have some options there. But if you're trying to fix this, usually what I would do, and you have to make sure it's flat, right? Make sure your snaps are on, O snaps here is on, end snaps are on, right? And actually use a polyline, right? My shortcut is always L for polyline. I just use L all the time. And what you do is you basically sort of snap to the 4 corners. I'm assuming that if something can't cap, correctly, it's usually something that's more complicated than this. So, it's probably something that, has some sort of weird complexity to it, right? But still works as long as everything is planar, meaning that it sits on a flat plane, it's 2D. This will work, right? I'm missing something here. Okay, this is basically, I'm going to change this back to continuous just so it doesn't throw us off the sort of line type. So as long as these are flat, right, you can do a command called planar surface. It's also right here. If you pull this out, the sort of lower right corner, this guy, surface from planar curves, but it's called planar surface. And you can select these and just make a surface out of them, right? You'll notice that these are separate, right? So after you do the operation, the line still stays in place, right? Okay. So if these were in place, I can move it, use my move command, and just use the corner snap it back into place, right? And then select both of them and join, J-O-I-N, join them. It may switch to a different color, so you may have to put it back into the correct layer, or just type join, select object first, and then select that object, the surface second, then it will join to the original object's color or layer, right? So that's a way to kind of work around. It's sort of annoying, but it's you'll have some places, some situations where you actually have to do this to patch it. But for the most part, if your geometry is clean, cap will work. Okay, so actually I shouldn't delete that. What we're going to do, and I'm actually going to have to make a larger plane, so make a plane. Oops, sorry. Not planar surface, but plane. And just click so it's larger, right? And it covers that sort of boundary, all right? And what I'm going to do is, you can do this in the 3D view. I tend not to switch around views a lot. I'm just used to using the 3D view. But if you're getting sort of confused, you can come to this view, one of the side views, right? Select the plane that you made and use the Alt key to Alt drag and copy. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to place a couple of cut levels. Just continue doing that. And maybe here, and maybe here, right? Maybe this one is, it's okay. All right, so I've made basically a total of 4 cut levels. I don't know, maybe we need one down there, who knows. That's why I actually use the 3D view, because the 3D view kind of gives you a better idea of where things are, right? Yeah, that looks all right. Okay, so delete that. So these are going to be my cutting planes. I'm going to use these to slice this up, okay? Now, one thing I'll point out, instead of using trim, right, because trim basically deletes stuff. If I try to trim this and let's say, do that, it deletes stuff, right? And that's not what we want. So the command here, that's sort of a relative of trim, is called split. Split. So to ask you for what objects to split first, right? So, pay attention. You always want to look at the command line to see what it's asking you for. It's asking you for what object to split, so you select these guys, right? All of this. Enter. And then it asks you for select cutting objects, which are these 4 planes. So go and select these 4 planes, and then enter. Now it'll run. Don't worry about the split failed, because basically the way we're doing this, some of the planes are trying to split something over here that it doesn't intersect with, right? So obviously, of course, the split will fail. It'll run a little bit, but it will basically bisect a lot of the stuff. I'm just going to hide this really quick. Hide. You'll see there's new lines here, right? Now, the reason this actually still, when I selected they're still together, is because I grouped them earlier, right? So you'll actually have to ungroup everything for this to work correctly. And now you'll see that these are cut apart into sections. If I show the planes, then you'll see that they're cut apart at the sort of locations of the cutting planes. Now this is the part where I do go to one of the side views here to get a better view of things, right? And So what I do is I basically try to select everything except for one of the layers, and you might have to zoom in a lot because might accidentally select rid of this stuff if you're not careful. But what I do is I do select this and just go just beyond that sort of bottom plane, right? So I know I'm selecting everything that's above this plane, but not anything in it, below it, and you can zoom in to check, right? Are you getting anything weird? And select the cutting planes as well by holding on the Shift key to basically add to the selection. Move it up. All right. Do the same with the next part, and you can just sort of do that, right? Drag it to the very end just so you're just covering it, okay? Hold down the Shift key, select those, pull it up, do that again. Oops. And then this last little bit. Okay. So now you can delete these planes, and like before, group them. Control these guys, Control G, group each and every one of these sections, right? And then now you can go back into this perspective view, look at this and say, okay, I want to arrange it a certain way. Okay, so now you have the sort of separated plan cut. Obviously, where the cut happens depends on you. Same thing, right, as though because the split command doesn't self-heal, so you will actually have to cap these guys. And when you actually run it on a group, you'll see that it basically does everything automatically. So select it, cap. It tries to do everything that it can, and so just go through and cap all this. It fills in pretty much everything, automatically, unless you have really bad geometry or geometry that's just not planar that it can't, fill. All right, so that's pretty great. And at this point, you just basically want to kind of find a view, similar. Whoops, not this one. Similar to this, right? And it's okay. It depends on whether or not I want overlap or not, or whether I want to have a perspectival or a parallel projection. It's up to you. This is actually better for rendering purposes, right? Because these are sort of filled in and solid, so you can actually arrange it so you can have a nice rendering. The other, and sort of, just pick a view and rearrange the relationship, right? So you'll see the angle changes the sort of spacing a lot. So that's why you want to kind of predetermine, are you going to do this angle or are you going to do that angle first? So that changes a lot the relationship. And don't forget, you can, because these actually correlate very closely, to kind of draw in the dotted lines that go in between all these, right? The other sort of variation of this is actually, even in a sort of plan orientation like this, these sort of plan renderings, even in the top view, if you give it shadow, if you turn the sun on and add a shadow, cast a really strong shadow, these can actually turn out very, very three-dimensional. Okay, so that's just something to remember, that that it can be really effective like this. It's a sort of enhanced version of the plan. Okay, so that's the sort of first type. Now for the second type, which is the section perspective, right? I am going to, let me just close that. I am going to go back to our original and actually just kind of get this out of the way. I'm going to hide all that. Hide that. So copy this out again, put it somewhere near here, and hide that. Okay, so if you look at this, this is a slightly different technique. Obviously, we can do the same if we're looking for a vertical cut. what you will usually do is basically sort of draw a line on the ground like that, a straight line. Sort of look at it in plan, right, and position it where you want your section cut to be. Straight down the middle, maybe, or maybe a little bit over here, whatever, you know. You can do the same technique if it's just different in the sense that you extrude this. Extrude. Just do the extrude curve right here. Extrude curve, if you drew a sort of straight line, it will actually just automatically make you a plane like this, right? And you can split this and it'll give you two halves, right? There's actually a better command for this, and I'm going to show you that right now. So the earlier command, we actually had to heal it or cap things, right? This one actually does it automatically. So it's called, you also need a line on ground like this, and it's called the wire cut, wire cut. So it's sort of like cutting styrofoam. It says, asks you for the cutting curve, or you can draw a line. If you click on the line, you can draw a line, but we pre-drew a line. I usually try to pre-draw a line. It gives you a better idea. So you pre-draw the line, and then you click it and it automatically jumps to select objects to cut. So you basically want to select these guys, okay? And then press enter when done, or right mouse button. And it'll actually say direction. By default, it should actually be Z, so it actually should show you something like this, all right? But those were just some added options I was messing with earlier. But what this does is basically asking you for the plane of your cut. All right, so you just make sure you want to drag it above the sort of top of your model, and just click anywhere, and then it'll move into this, which basically is the direction of the cut. And you can see there's a lot of options here. You do both sides no, or keep all yes or no. We're gonna do keep all equals no for now, just to see what happens, right? But basically, if I click in either direction, it will take out one of these sides. So I click there, and it will say part to cut away, enter to accept, and sure. Okay. So this version, sometimes it'll do some like this weird thing here and there. You might have to clean it out, but generally what it does is that after you do the cut, it self-heals the cutting planes, if it can, for the most part. All right, so that's kind of nifty or useful. That's just like one version. So that's a wire cut command. Now, if we did a different option, for example, let me draw a line in the other direction. And I'm using the object tracks to make sure that these are, perpendicular lines. Okay, so what we had earlier was basically the section perspective. If we do the wire cut again, select cutting line, and then select these objects, enter. So go up, and now this time let's click on the keep all equals yes, right? Make sure it's saying yes, okay? And then turn it and just pick a direction. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so you'll see a cut has happened, right? But this time, it hasn't deleted the stuff in the direction of the cut, right? So it's the same thing. Sometimes I just do the plane so I can kind of see things a little better, or I go to whichever view this is, right, and find the view. So this is a better way of selecting this stuff. Just move it, you can move it apart. I'm moving it apart just to show you, right? Because basically this has, filled itself, right? It's self-healed. So group this, group Control G, Control G, okay? I'm actually going to move this back into place because what you want to do here, and just snap it, right? So this is one half and that's the other half, right? And, whoops, I misaligned it. Use the move, snap it, okay. So that's matching, right? Okay, so that's one half, that's one half. So you can choose at this point, you can choose, okay, I want my section perspective to be looking into here, right? And it's very simple. What you do is you do one image export or rendering or line drawing, whatever it is, right? If you kind of set it to like this, whatever, have a base rendering like this, right? So you have color, have background, and that would be the sort of equivalent of this half of your section cut. And then, so I just hit it, and then you type show, whoops. Bring this back, right? And then you hide that, so you hide this. And whatever else crap that's sort of, you know, behind it, right? And then you export that as line work too. And you basically just take this without rendering it or giving any color, you composite it onto here. So you basically use this in the same position. Remember always to save the view, right? I'm going to actually use a command called show selected just to, you know, show. So basically you have the two parts. You can, you know, hide this one first to do a nice, you know, sort of, this is the section perspective that you want to see, base rendering, whatever, color it in, you know, any of the sort of export options you have at this point, right? And then show this guy and hide that guy and do this separately, and you can just do a simple line export, or you can even render it and just ghost it in really, really faintly, you know, at 15%, whatever, or just export the line work, right? And then composite it in, you know, the same way that you see here as well. To actually get the dollar line, you would actually have to export this into Illustrator and do the rendering match sort of technique that we've seen before. But you know, that you should know how to do at this point, right? So I'm not going to hold your hand and walk you through the specifics of that. Okay, so these are the three sort of different options that you get. And there's a lot of variations off of these. You can have hybrids, ones that are both, you know, section perspective and exploded or whatever. You know, they're all sort of different ways to kind of deal with the same representational problem. Okay, all right, that's it.